Hello, my juicy peaches, and welcome back to my channel. It is your priestess Peaches here, supporting you to live your juiciest life and co-create a heavenly world. And as you can see by the title, I am doing a part 2 about Aubrey Marcus's love doctor, Marc Gafni, or Gafni. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce his name. I keep saying Gafni, but I've got a feeling it is Gafni or Gafni. So I'm really sorry if I am butchering his name and getting it completely wrong. I am likely to say Gafni instead of Gafni because it's just the way it seems to come out. So sorry if I get that wrong. I'm actually going to be focusing on a video that a very kind viewer linked me in my previous video about Marc. And this video is one of Aubrey Marcus's episodes on his channel, and it is with Aubrey himself, Marc Gafni, and Marc Gafni's current wife, Kristina Kincaid, or KK. The video is really explaining why Aubrey has decided to stay in contact and collaboration with Marc Gafni even after learning about Marc Gafni's past and the allegations against him, his misdemeanors and complaints against him and things like that. So in the video, Aubrey speaks about why he is remaining friends with Marc Gafni, why he is supporting him, why he is still going to collaborate with him. Also in the video, Aubrey asks Marc questions about his past and about the complaints and about his 2 misdemeanors with teenage girls when he was younger. And also in the video, Kristina Kincaid, or KK, she courageously and bravely shares about her journey of healing from sexual trauma. But the overarching theme of the video is really about Aubrey Marcus defending Marc Gafni and explaining why he is doing that, why he is in support of Marc, and why he is giving Marc Gafni or Gafni a platform. I just want to share some of the issues and red flags that I can see from this video, and I want to go into the wider topics within society as well. And I really strongly recommend that if you haven't seen my first video on Marc Gafni, to go and watch that video first, because that has a lot of information that this is going to be a continuation of. This is going to be an expansion and extension from that video. So I'm going to be speaking more or less as if you've already watched that video. So if you haven't seen that, then please do go and watch that video first, because you will then have an understanding of where I'm coming from in this video. So I'm going to start by sharing some general issues that come up when it comes to sexual abuse, when it comes to issues with predators, manipulators, perpetrators, offenders. So perpetrators or offenders and predators are usually highly manipulative people, and the type of manipulation is very insidious, meaning that it can start off lightly and small, and it gets under your skin and in your veins, and before you know it, you are being completely controlled and coerced and manipulated by this person. Another thing about offenders and perpetrators and predators is that they delude themselves, they believe their own lies, they deceive themselves, and they minimize and trivialize the harm that they have caused to others. They will bypass, they will victim blame, they will gaslight. They are very clever at twisting narratives, twisting language to absolve them from their wrongdoing or to paint a different narrative. And sometimes they can outright lie, and they can completely twist things and victim blame and twist the narrative so the blame and the fault is on the victim. This specific type of manipulative person can be very charismatic, and like I said, they can be very coercive, and it can get under your skin and it can shatter your reality from the inside out. In this video, I'm going to be mostly focusing on the 2 teenage girls, the 2 misdemeanors that Marc Gafni has. These are definite things that did happen, that went to the police, and that he received 2 misdemeanors for. But this is not me discounting any of the women that have come forward to share their stories and accounts of manipulation, sexual misconduct, sexually inappropriate behavior, coercion, deception, infidelity, and power dynamics. But I'm mostly going to be focusing on the 2 teenage girls or developing children, because my dharma and my mission in this world is to contribute to help healing CSA in this world. And so those are the things I'm going to be focusing on most. I don't know what I'm allowed to say on this channel, what words I'm allowed to use. My channel has been demonetized anyway, and I've been shadow blocked for years, and it's really annoying. So I'm just going to say the words because I've got nothing to lose at this point. So I'm just going to be looking down at my notes so I don't forget anything. So I really hope that's okay. In my last video, I shared about why what Marc Gafni did to those teenage girls is CSA, child sexual abuse. I shared what to consider for older teenage males and adult men when it comes to teenage girls and young teenage girls and the risk of harm involved if you pursue romantic relationship with them. So please go ahead and watch that video because it explains about the age of consent, it explains about why it is CSA, it explains about the power dynamics, the vulnerability in the young girls, it explains about the risk of harm you are causing, and it explains about how teenage girls are developing children. So in this new video that my viewer shared with me and on Marc's website, an issue comes up, which is very common when it comes to offenders. Offenders will claim that they did not know what the legal age of consent was. They didn't understand consent and the legal age of consent. This is a very common thing that child sex offenders will say. They will say, oh, I didn't know she was underage. I had no idea about the age of consent. I didn't realize. And they claim to not know that that is illegal. When it comes to somebody like Marc, I find it very hard to believe that somebody who is very well educated, who is studying religion, who is studying to become a guide, who is a camp leader, and somebody who has been through the education system, even in the 1980s, I find it very hard to believe that he wouldn't have known what the legal age of consent was, especially when he was a camp leader, because he would have had training about this. He would have been told about these things. If he's been through the education system, he would have had sex education. If he is learning about religion, I am pretty sure that he would have known the legal age of consent. I grew up in the 80s and I remember my sex education, we were taught the age of consent literally in primary school. This was something we grew up knowing. And let's just say somebody doesn't know the legal age of consent, somebody knows what constitutes an adult and what constitutes a child and a developing child, right? You know what constitutes an adult. So in the UK, we are considered adults when we turn 18. This is a very known fact that you know from a very young age, and you will definitely know it by the time you are 18. And in America, some places it's 18, some places it's 21, and it's about the legal age of drinking as well. Everybody knows these things, especially if you've been through the education system, especially if you're a camp leader, especially if you are studying to become a religious leader, somebody high up in religion. You would have been taught the legal age of consent. You would have known what constitutes an adult, what constitutes a child. But let's just say, let's play devil's advocate here and say that Marc Gafni didn't know the legal age of consent, and that he didn't know that he was an adult, she was a child, okay? Let's just say he didn't know that. There is a massive, massive difference between somebody who is 19 and somebody who is 13 or 14. And there is a massive difference between somebody who is 24 and somebody who is 16. There's a huge developmental difference and an emotional maturity difference, as well as physical maturity difference and life experience difference. So just to give you an idea, if you're listening from the UK, a 13 or 14-year-old girl is someone who is in year 8 or 9, and then a 19-year-old guy is somebody who has gone through past sixth form and is either at university or out in the workplace. So that's what we're talking about here. Somebody who is 13 or 14 is so completely immature compared to somebody who is 19 or 20, right? Somebody who's out at university. And the same again for a 16-year-old and a 24-year-old, okay? So 16-year-old is in year 10 or 11 at school, and a 24-year-old is beyond university out there working, doing what they're doing. There is such a huge difference. But unfortunately, this does seem to be an issue in society that older guys will want to be with young teenage girls. And a lot of men will claim that it is evolutionary psychology, they can't help it, it's biologically hardwired into them. And like I said in my previous video, even if that is the case, even if it is true, the evolutionary psychology perspective that some men have involuntary sexual attraction to young teenage girls because of fertility cues, it's really important that they do not act on them, they do not pursue, and that they come into their protector rather than their pursuing mode within them, because these are children, developing children. They haven't developed properly yet. They haven't fully developed mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, life experience. There is a huge power imbalance and there is a real vulnerability in the younger girl and a huge risk of harm. Surely, as a 19-year-old in college, you would be able to see the huge difference between you and a 13 or 14-year-old girl. So that was the first kind of red flag and issue that I saw that is very common for offenders to say, is to deny that they knew the legal age of consent. Now, I don't know whether it's true or not. I find it hard to believe, but it is an issue in society and we really need to educate teenagers about these things so that they definitely understand the legal age of consent and why that is in place. So the next issue that I saw was Marc speaking about a love letter that this 14-year-old girl had sent him after they had broken up. He doesn't have the physical love letter. We don't know if it exists or not. This girl, now woman, says that she never wrote a love letter, that is a complete lie. She never sent him a love letter, okay? So we don't know. We don't know whether this love letter ever existed or not. It is their word against each other here. So Marc is referring to this love letter from this 14-year-old girl after their relationship ended as proof that it was a mutual, consensual, loving, romantic relationship between them. That's not what this letter proves. I need to be clear here. Even if a child expresses affection, admiration, or longing, it doesn't make it consensual. It doesn't make it loving. It doesn't make this a consensual, loving, romantic relationship. It doesn't make it ethical. It doesn't make it appropriate. It doesn't make it safe. What this letter actually proves is that a very impressionable young teenage girl, a child, a developing child, was very much taken advantage of and may have been feeling confusing feelings for the person that took advantage of her. That is what that letter shows. There is such thing as a trauma bond. There is such thing as coercion and grooming and manipulation. Love letters are very common from victims to their abusers. This is a very common thing that happens because they have been taken advantage of, manipulated, coerced, groomed, all those things. They don't have the emotional maturity to understand what has happened yet, and they can often feel very intense feelings for the person that abused them. So that love letter shows the emotional and psychological impact of being groomed and taken advantage of, not the presence of real informed consent or a loving relationship. I'm just going to read what I put here. In reality, letters like that often reflect the emotional confusion and trauma bonding that happens when a child is taken advantage of. When a child is taken advantage of, this creates a false sense of connection where love, loyalty, and even desire become tangled with manipulation and coercion. The child may genuinely believe they're in love, but that doesn't mean what's happening is safe or okay or ethical or legal. Adults who exploit that dynamic often point to the child's affection as evidence that nothing wrong occurred. But that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. The victim may not realize until years later that they were taken advantage of. And that confusion is part of the abuse. So when offenders use things like love letters to prove consent, to prove mutual loving, romantic feelings. What it really shows is that they still haven't comprehended the dynamic, the power dynamic, the developmental differences, the sexual and physical differences, the emotional differences. It shows that they don't understand the abuse they have committed and why it is abusive. Usually, offenders like this have forms of self-deception and delusion playing out. I spoke about arousal discordance in my previous video. Arousal discordance is when your arousal, turn-on, desires and your genital and body responses are out of alignment. And sometimes what can happen to victims is that they are experiencing arousal responses to the abuse, and it can be incredibly confusing for victims. But a lot of times perpetrators will use that arousal response in their victim and delude themselves into thinking that the victim felt the same way as them, the victim was attracted to them, the victim desired it, was turned on, enjoying it, when it couldn't be further from the truth. Like I said in my previous video, arousal is not always attraction, arousal is not always desire, it is not always turn on, and it certainly isn't consent. So the next issue that I want to bring up is minimizing, because Marc shares that he never touched below the waist and that it was just teenage necking. I really dislike that term. And Aubrey was like, I don't really know what necking means. He's like, nothing below the waist. This is him trying to say it wasn't that bad because I never touched below the waist. But this really doesn't change anything if that is true. It's a very different account to the victim's account, which is available online. Even if that is true, it doesn't change anything. This girl was taken advantage of, she was violated and abused, and she couldn't consent. And saying that you never touch below the waist doesn't make that any better. This is, again, something that offenders will try to do. They will try to minimize, they will try to trivialize, they will try to make it seem like it wasn't a big deal. Like I say, this is very different to the victim's account, Sarah's account. She says that he would come into her room at night and force himself on her, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. It's the fact that he's still using this minimizing language to this day. I know he will say that he is just sharing his perspective and his account and the truth of what happened, and he wants to be clear about exactly what happened and what didn't. But this really does come across as minimizing and trivializing, and from a victim perspective, that would feel awful because that victim has still been taken advantage of and abused. And to hear her abuser saying, oh, well, I didn't touch below the waist, it was just teenage necking, as if that makes it okay, as if that changes anything. It's just a very typical thing that perpetrators and offenders will say and do to try to come across as better or to try to make themselves feel better about what's happened. So the next issue that comes up is about what is very, very common for survivors of sexual abuse. It's very, very common for survivors to not realize until later in life that they were abused and taken advantage of. It can take a long time to really understand what's actually happened and to accept that and to process that. So the reason this comes up is because Marc claims that originally Sarah was agreed that it was a loving, consensual, romantic relationship, and she sent him this love letter. Like I say, that doesn't prove that at all. But he claims that later down the line, she started working with people that brainwashed her into this abuse narrative, he calls it, an abuse narrative. What's likely happened here is that this young girl has developed and matured and grown up and had life experience, maybe even had children of her own, and then realized what actually happened back then. Sometimes a victim or survivor can suppress memories and things don't come back until later on in life when there are triggers or when the person is finally feeling safe. That is when memories of abuse can return. It's likely that Sarah grew up and realized what happened was not okay. It's not that she has been brainwashed and is changing the narrative. As an adult woman with life experience, sexual experience, emotional maturity, full mental development, she can now comprehend what happened when she was younger. So I've just put here, it's very common even for adult survivors of sexual coercion, sexual abuse and other kinds of abuse to not realize the abuse at the time or shortly after. It's only with space and time away from the abuser and space and time to process that they can fathom the extent of things and unpack what really went on. It can take years to get over the betrayal and also the self-blame and shame that can come with this type of abuse. Sarah was 13 or 14 years old. She could not consent. Many offenders will say that they were not forceful or violent, and so they do not see it as abusive. But just because a child is complying does not mean they are consenting. Even if a child says they want it and enjoy it, this still is not consent. Please watch my previous video about that. So what many offenders fail to realize is that a young, impressionable child will not have the life experience and mental emotional capacity to realize that they are being taken advantage of and abused. It's usually later in life that a victim will realize what's happened, and in this case Sarah realizes that she was misled by somebody older, and that process takes time. It's not that she's being brainwashed to change the narrative, it's that the truth emerges over time. It is not that she has been brainwashed into thinking what happened was abuse, it's that what happened was abuse. And it's clear from Marc Gafni speaking about these things, he believes that this 14-year-old girl was on the same level as him. That's what he truly believes, that she was on the same level as him. Because all the things he's saying, him using this letter, him talking about how it wasn't abusive, it was just teenage necking, it was a consensual, mutual, loving, romantic relationship. He still sees this 14-year-old girl as if she was on the same level as him. He still believes this, and he's defending and justifying it and excusing himself. And this is not genuine accountability. This is not genuine remorse. This is justifying and defending and absolving himself and minimizing and trivializing. This isn't taking ownership, this isn't accountability, this isn't responsibility. The next piece that comes up is about the 16-year-old girl when Marc Gafni was 24. And in this instance, Marc was married and living with his wife, and this teenage girl was a troubled teenage girl that was having problems with her parents at home, and Marc Gafni and his wife took her in to care for her, to look after her, and Marc was her camp leader and her mentor. He only seems to acknowledge that it was wrong due to his position of authority, rather than him being married, rather than her being 16 and him 24. He only seems to acknowledge that, yeah, it was wrong because he was her camp leader and in a position of authority. The thing that comes up in this instance is, again, the victim blaming. So his account of things is that she asked for sex, she wanted him to leave his wife, she tried to seduce him. Her account of things is very different, and you can see her account of things on the Dr. Phil episode. She says that Marc Gafni would force himself on her, things escalated very quickly, and that she felt completely violated and betrayed because she saw him as a father figure. So he says that she asked for sex, she begged me to leave my wife, she tried to seduce him, oh poor him, right? And he is very dismissive in the way he speaks about her, and I just strongly sensed like resentment and anger. I really sensed this deep resentment that he has. And Aubrey asks him if he regrets it. And he says, yes, I regret it. But I really strongly sense this deep resentment and anger, and that he regrets it not because he's remorseful of the harm that he has caused this teenage girl, but rather because of its impact that it's had on his life. That is the strong sense that I got. I may be wrong there, but that's what it felt like. Yes, he regrets it, but I don't sense that he feels remorseful, again, because he is victim blaming and he is blaming her for trying to seduce him. Let's be clear here. You have a vulnerable teenage girl who is having problems at home that you have taken in to look after and protect and care for. You're her camp leader, you're her mentor, you have a wife. that you live with, even if a vulnerable 16-year-old girl that you have taken into care for due to her being troubled, even if she comes on to you, you have to be a certain kind of guy to act on that, especially in your marital home when you're living with your wife. To not think to yourself, okay, this girl is clearly troubled because she is trying to come on to me, she's having problems at home, like she's clearly troubled and she needs help. To not think to yourself, okay, we need to get this girl psychological help, and instead to act on that, you have to be a certain kind of guy to do that. And this is where I see Marc Gafni's wounding. This is where I see a greater wound in society as well that I really do feel called to speak about. Some men who are not sexually empowered within themselves actually fear the feminine and the sexuality of the feminine. They actually feel overpowered by the feminine and by female sexuality, and these men feel a helplessness and a powerlessness towards the feminine because they cannot contain or be masterful within themselves. They cannot contain their urges. They cannot channel and be masterful of their own eros. And so they subconsciously or consciously seek to overpower the feminine, have power over the feminine in reaction to this wound. It can happen both ways, but I'm speaking about some men because that's what's come up when speaking about Marc Gafni, Aubrey Marcus, this whole situation. Some men feel out of control and they feel powerless, so they seek to dominate, they seek to control, and they seek to have power over the feminine because they are disempowered within themselves. And I strongly sense that this is part of a collective wound that Marc Gafni experiences, and he may or may not be aware of it. An empowered masculine man would never see a troubled teenage girl's advances towards him as a permission slip to act on his urges, as a permission slip to be sexual with her and to act on that. An empowered masculine man and a sexually empowered man would feel deeply protective of her. And yes, back then when Marc was 24 years old, it's unlikely he was an empowered masculine man back in the 80s, like he says, but it's clear that he's still not. This is the issue, is that he's still not, because of the way he is victim blaming, the way he is minimizing, the way he is bypassing things and being very dismissive, the way he is speaking about it to absolve himself from wrongdoing. He still is not an empowered masculine man or sexually masterful. So I'm going to say again, even if evolutionary psychology is true for some men and they have an involuntary, biological, involuntary arousal response or sexual attraction to teenage girls or young teenage girls due to fertility cues, it's really important for men to not pursue that, to not act on it, to not become predatory, and to not delude themselves that this is equal, ethical, or okay, because it's not. Even if a teenage girl says yes to sexual interaction with you, that is not consent, it is compliance. Even if a teenage girl is saying that she wants it, saying that she's in love with you, saying that she feels the same way, that is not consent. That is a vulnerable, developing child that doesn't understand or have the mental and emotional or sexual maturity or life experience to consent. Even if a teenage girl is coming on to you, that is not your permission slip to be sexual with her. You must understand the great likelihood of harm. So many women and teenage girls understand what it is like to be taken advantage of as a teenager by older guys. It is prevalent in our society and it needs to stop. I'm not going to speak about this dynamic in the reverse way round, like a teenage boy being taken advantage of by an adult woman. That's not in this video. That may be a video I do in the future. We really need to raise the sexual consciousness on this planet, and we need men and the masculine to come into their protective mode rather than their pursuing and predatory mode. So the next issue that comes up is Marc and Aubrey speaking about how Marc has tried to reach out to everybody openly and offer an open conversation, a public open conversation or a private conversation, but funnily enough, no one wants to speak to him. Aubrey is speaking about this as if, yeah, that's not fair on Marc, and he is agreeing that, well, Marc's done his part, so it's not his fault that nobody wants to speak to him. I just want to point out here that not many victims are going to feel safe speaking face to face with their abuser. It is a tall ask to expect victims and survivors, people somebody has harmed, to want to sit down face to face with them. When survivors go to therapy, it's very much advised for them not to have contact with the people that have harmed them, with the people that have abused them. It is highly triggering. It can re-traumatize a person. It can cause PTSD. And especially in this situation, when Marc Gafni has been very dismissive and invalidating and sharing completely different accounts to the victims. And if you listen to Marc and what he's saying in his videos and what he's saying on his website and through his teachings, he is trying to absolve himself and rewrite the narrative of his wrongdoing. He is trying to absolve himself from the harm he has caused. He can't see it clearly. Why would they want to sit down with him face to face and speak to him when he has abused them, when he is seeing things from a completely different perspective, when he is being dismissive, when he's minimizing, trivializing, gaslighting, bypassing, and dismissing them? Why on earth would these people want to sit down and speak to him face to face after the way he is speaking about them and the harm he has caused them? It is far too much to expect of people you have harmed. It is so unfair and unrealistic to expect that of people you have harmed. It is highly narcissistic to think that these people owe you a conversation. Even if a perpetrator, an offender, is genuinely remorseful and genuinely sorry, that doesn't mean that the victims or survivors of the harm they have caused have to forgive them. That doesn't mean that they have to have compassion. That doesn't mean that they have to speak to them. Those survivors do not owe their abusers a damn thing. It's so blind. It is so blind of you to not understand that and to not respect that, to not have compassion for that and empathy for that. Like, as somebody who has harmed people, whether intentional or not, as somebody who has harmed someone else, you cannot expect them to want to speak to you. You need to have respect for their boundaries. You need to honor that. You need to understand it and have compassion and kindness towards them. Not feel hard done by because no one's speaking to you after you have abused them. And the fact that Aubrey is just agreeing with Marc on this, as if Marc's got a leg to stand on here, like as if it's okay, just blows my mind. Because Aubrey is supposed to be somebody who is highly conscious, highly aware, who creates safe spaces for people. And so for him not to understand this basic victim-abuser dynamic and to agree with Marc that he is owed some kind of conversation by people he has harmed, and that because they're not speaking to him, poor Marc, just blows my mind. It blows my mind. So this leads me into the forgiveness piece. So Aubrey speaks about forgiveness, and he speaks about how he forgives Marc. This is what he is implying with what he's saying, that he forgives Marc for Marc's past mistakes and misunderstandings. And it's like he has bought into everything Marc has told him, and he believes everything Marc has said. And it's clear that Aubrey believes that Marc has changed, that he's grown as a person, and that he has learnt from his past. This can be such a common thing. What I don't see, and maybe it's just because it's not been expressed here or spoken about, but what I don't see and what is very unclear is whether Aubrey has really sat with this information and really looked into the victims' accounts and perspectives and the complaints and really truly sat with that and felt into it and listened to them. It genuinely just seems like Aubrey is taking Marc's word for it and just seeing it only from Marc's perspective. It doesn't occur to Aubrey that Marc Marc's perspective may be deluded, or that Marc's perspective may not be the whole truth. It doesn't occur to Aubrey that Marc is minimizing, trivializing, bypassing, dismissing, victim blaming, and potentially deceiving. Marc Gafni is a highly charismatic person with big energy, and he speaks with such conviction that it's very easy to be sucked in to his version of things and his narrative. And it seems like this is exactly what's happened with Aubrey. And he's got blinkers on. He is not choosing to look at the full perspective here, and therefore he can't see this clear minimizing, this clear trivializing, bypassing, dismissiveness of what Marc is saying even now to this day. So this is a common issue that comes up, is people's willingness just to forgive when there is a lack of accountability. It's forgiveness that bypasses accountability, forgiveness that bypasses true ownership and true responsibility, and it's forgiveness over the full truth, over full true perspective. It also seeps into loyalty over truth. And I genuinely believe that Aubrey has a massive lack of discernment here going on for some reason. And this is dangerous, especially if you are a person of influence and you are giving someone a platform, because forgiveness without full truth and accountability in this kind of way can allow the offender to continue to act out that wounding instead of truly healing it. And that is what I see with everything Marc is speaking about. And Aubrey speaks about his sense of Marc and his feelings about Marc, and that his sense of him, his feelings, his intuition, if you will, tells him that he is trustworthy, shows Aubrey that Marc is trustworthy. For somebody like Aubrey, who, like I said, is supposed to be this really highly conscious person that feels energies and speaks truth and connects with truth and has guidance, it really surprises me that he hasn't at least considered the counter to what Marc is saying. It really seems like he hasn't even considered it, and that he is just blindly believing him. And it surprises me that he can't see what I have clearly seen immediately. And this brought up kind of thoughts and questions to me, like, maybe it is just easier for women to see this wound and to pick up on it because we've likely been through it. And maybe it is harder for a man to see that. I question if it's due to Aubrey being male and not having these alarm bells and this women's intuition, okay? But I also question if it's because Aubrey has similar wounding. I'm not saying it's the same by any means, because I don't think that, but there's something similar, some similar wounding happening here. And him believing in Marc, it kind of gives Aubrey permission to act out from his urges and his wounding and his eros, right? And this may be completely subconscious. And just to touch on this isn't me dissing polyamorous dynamics. That's not what I'm seeing here. It's not about poly versus monogamy. There's definitely something darker that I perceive within Marc. And I feel like it is kind of a sickness in society. And it's so sneaky, and it deludes people. It completely causes people to be deluded, and they just can't see through the veil. So staying on the subject of forgiveness, this was another part of forgiveness that came up that I saw. And this is when Kristina Kincaid is sharing about healing from sexual trauma and how she forgives her abuser. And I just want to honor Kristina's healing journey here. I want to honor her choices and the things that she has done for herself to heal from sexual trauma, and her decisions and her perspective and viewpoint. It's so complex, and it's not for anybody to judge anybody else's healing journey. There's different ways you can go about things, different ways that work for different people. There's different ways you can look at things, different ways that you can perceive things. It is so completely subjective. I am going to share what came up for me and something I want to touch on about forgiveness. So like I said, she was talking about the forgiveness that she has come to, that she has forgiven her abuser or abusers, and I completely understand forgiveness. I am a survivor myself. I have been through the depths of things myself, and I can completely understand how it's possible to forgive someone that has seriously wronged you and abused you in the most awful ways possible. I understand how you can find levels and layers of understanding and compassion for somebody who has wronged you and harmed you. I understand how you can consider their journey and what has led them to becoming abusive and perpetrating. I understand how you can come to a space of acceptance for who they are and what they chose. And I understand how you can genuinely forgive someone, even if they are never going to change. You can even then still forgive someone. I understand that. You can forgive who they are because you can understand their journey, their wounds, their faults, their inability to heal and reform. And of course, you can forgive. You can find forgiveness. But I just want to say some people can't, and that's okay too. And I also want to say you don't have to. You don't have to forgive someone. And I know that that is a controversial thing to say and that a lot of people would disagree with me on it. But it is true that you don't have to forgive someone. The aspect of this that I really want to speak about is that Kristina was also speaking about her finding forgiveness because she wouldn't be who she is today without what happened to her. And Aubrey was very quick to jump in here on this part of the conversation because he was speaking about receiving the gifts and the lessons and the blessings, and about how KK or Kristina is who she is because of what happened, and that she wouldn't be who she is without it. Now, everyone is different and everyone has their own way of dealing with trauma and abuse and healing from it. But I very deeply question, is it true that Kristina or anybody wouldn't be who she is today without what happened to her? This is complex to explain, so please bear with me. But of course, growth can come through trauma, okay? And growth can come in spite of trauma, despite of trauma. But yes, growth can come due to trauma. But that doesn't mean that the abuse was justified. That doesn't mean that it was beneficial or needed or good. It doesn't mean that we should condone what happened. And I know that's not what they're saying. And of course, forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean condoning, and acknowledging the blessings and the growth since the trauma doesn't mean they're condoning it. But there's another side of this where we do have to be careful with the words and these words and ideas, because offenders can use things like this to excuse the abuse that they inflict on their victims. There are infinite ways a person can grow. No one can say for sure whether Kristina or any survivor would have found, for instance, sexual empowerment without being sexually abused. People find sexual empowerment without having to go through sexual abuse. No one can say that she wouldn't have experienced the various things she has experienced, but maybe just in different ways. There's this kind of paradigm of contrast in this 3D realm where and polarity, where it's like we need to experience the opposite to know what the opposite is. There's this whole paradigm. But I just want to say you don't have to experience sexual abuse to know sexual empowerment. And this is really a sliding doors kind of conversation, right? We can't say for sure. But what we can say for sure is that no child, no person should ever have to endure sexual abuse. That's what we can say for sure. No matter the outcomes of that abuse, what we know for sure is that sexual abuse is not okay. I have to say here, and I don't mean to be negative, and I don't want to say this to disempower anybody, but it's actually quite rare for survivors to find true sexual empowerment. That's actually quite a rare thing. And so maybe it's the case with Kristina, I don't know, but it's not the case for most survivors, unfortunately. I'm not saying that it always has to be like that. And the thing is, I wouldn't want any offender to be kind of taking on this idea that my abuse made me who I am today. I'm grateful for the abuse I went through and I forgive my abuser because I've received so many blessings. I don't want any offender to take that as a permission slip to abuse, or as a way to excuse themselves, or as an idea that justifies it in their mind. It's not like that for most survivors, and it doesn't give anyone the right to be sexually abusive. And I guess what I was thinking whilst this conversation was happening is that I wouldn't want Marc to be sat there thinking, well, my wife's sexual abuse made her who she is today, and she has found forgiveness and she has found the blessings, and so that makes what I did in the past okay. I just wouldn't want any offender to be thinking on that train of thought. It's a really tricky thing to discuss, and there's a lot of complexity to it, and I really do get it so deeply. And I know that's not necessarily what they were saying, but I just needed to bring that up because it is an issue that can come up. Abusers do not get any credit for the healing and empowerment journey of a survivor. And like I said, I think it's important to say here that although you can learn via contrast, for example, sexual abuse or being sexually powerless and therefore knowing sexual empowerment, you don't have to experience sexual abuse and sexual powerlessness to become fully sexually empowered within yourself. And like I said before, contrary to popular belief, you don't have to forgive your abuser. It doesn't make you less spiritual. It doesn't make you less evolved, less advanced, less kind. It doesn't make you less compassionate, less understanding. You can have understanding and compassion and choose not to forgive. It doesn't mean that you're harboring negative energy and lower vibrational frequencies. It doesn't mean that the law of attraction is not going to work for you. It's okay not to forgive someone who has deeply wronged you. And I just want to say that forgiveness is a process anyway. If it is something that you want and you do it for you, not for the offender, you do it for you, obviously. And it's a process. It is like peeling the layers of the onion, as they say. It's a process. Some days you may easily access forgiveness and you may easily feel that and have compassion and understanding and forgiveness. And other days you might not, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong. I really do not buy into this belief system in society that a victim has to forgive their abuser. You certainly don't need to force yourself to feel forgiveness, because you can't pretend that you forgive someone when you don't. And I don't want any survivor thinking that bad things are going to happen to them because they can't find forgiveness. I think that's utterly ridiculous. You don't have to forgive someone who has deeply wronged you and harmed you and abused you. It's okay to feel betrayed. It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to feel angry. These lower vibrational emotions aren't always a bad thing. Sometimes you really need to go there and really, really feel it and let yourself experience those emotions fully and let them process through you to move through your trauma and to integrate and to become empowered within yourself. You don't have to ignore these things and bypass and gaslight yourself. And the truth is, it's so complex. As a survivor myself, I know how complex it is, and you can literally hold it all at once. All these truths are true at once. All these aspects, all these perspectives can be true at once. And it's so difficult to explain that to people who haven't been through it. It is not black and white. And how dare anyone say to you that you have to forgive someone who has abused you? How dare anyone put that pressure onto you? You don't have to forgive out of fear, because that is disingenuous anyway. True forgiveness may or may not come. You don't have to push and force yourself to forgive or rush the process. It is whatever is true for you, whatever is right for you, and it is up to you. It is up to you personally whether you forgive or not, and whether you can forgive or not. And you're not a bad person if you don't. I don't want offenders to think that it's okay to abuse, as it makes victims better people and that they will be forgiven anyway, because this minimizes the harm abuse causes and it takes away responsibility of the perpetrator. It gives them an excuse and a way out, and it does not hold them accountable. So moving on to kind of the last piece now, and that is about the issue with Aubrey Marcus supporting Marc Gafni and giving him a platform. So I have typed here, it's such a common thing within spiritual spaces for male leaders to protect other male leaders, and for them to minimize and trivialize and bypass victims and preserve their power and influence. And it's a kind of spiritual patriarchy that lets spiritual language cover up unhealed power dynamics. And there just seems to be something really interesting happening that I'm sensing that is really hard to articulate. And I guess there's different ways of describing it. It could just be basic human psychology, right? And wounds attracting wounds, egos feeding off egos when it comes to Aubrey and Marc. Some are calling this dark forces, some are calling it demonic, sociopathic, narcissistic. There's definitely some kind of sickness in society, and I have deeply questioned around whether this is just human psychology or whether there's such thing as dark forces or demonic forces, things like that. And there's definitely something weird happening here, because it's like there is this veil and only some people can see through it and some people can't. And it's really odd. It's really odd. And there's this level of like manipulation happening, distortion, and this veil that's sort of hiding this darkness. And it hides it even from, or especially from, the people involved in it. So it's hidden from Aubrey. It's hidden from Marc even. I have recently been reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I think in there they refer to it as Maya or Maya. And it's like this veil, this hidden veil. I don't know whether it's a darkness or whether it is just human psychology, but whatever it is, it's like it wriggles its way inside and it convinces the person that they are justified and righteous and evolved and superior and that they are the victim. And I have really gone down some rabbit holes with this kind of thing. Trust me, I have gone down some dark rabbit holes when it comes to dark forces in society and CSA and things like that. And what I've come to realize is it actually doesn't matter whether it's dark forces or just people's normal human psychology and errors and personality disorders, or both, or all of it, whatever it is, it actually doesn't matter. There is no need to fear it, because the way back to wholeness is the same either way. But unfortunately, like I said in my previous video, and I really don't like saying this because I do believe in miracles and I do believe in collective awakenings and things like that, and collective shifts in consciousness. And so I do believe that everyone has the potential to heal, to reform, to manage these things, to genuinely shift and like the veil be lifted for them. I do genuinely believe that that is possible for everybody. But whether that actually happens or not, for many offenders it doesn't, unfortunately, because their level of consciousness, their perception, their viewpoint won't ever let them see beyond that, and they just may not have the capacity. And I'm certainly not about forgiveness, right? I know I was saying before, like, you don't have to forgive or whatever. I'm not about forgiveness, don't get me wrong, but I am about accountability. I am about responsibility. I am about true ownership and full perspective and truth. And I definitely see manipulation going on here. When it comes to Marc Gafni, I definitely see that happening. I see a lack of true empathy, a lack of true remorse. I see minimization, trivializing. I see dismissiveness, gaslighting, bypassing. And I definitely see wounds playing out within his teachings and all the things he says. But it is in such deceptive and sneaky ways. And that is what gives me this kind of skin crawling feeling and this just icky feeling. I feel this kind of predatory energy lingering with Marc Gafni, this slippery energy, this darkness, this strange, icky feeling. And I know this feeling, and I know that it is getting out of control in society at large, and it's due to the internet as well, and it really, really needs to stop. And I feel like this whole Aubrey, Vailana, Alana, polyamory thing is just like the surface level stuff here, but there's like deeper things at play when it comes to Marc and in society at large when it comes to CSA. So let me know in the comments your thoughts about this situation, your thoughts about Marc Gafni. Let me know if you watched my other video. Please feel free to share with me anything about your own journey and what you've come to realize. And if you know of any organizations or charities or agencies that can help victims, survivors, potential perpetrators, offenders, then please drop those links in the comments down below, and please do give this video a thumbs up if you have come this far and you've been listening to me for this long. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and it would really help my channel if you were to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe and write a comment. My channel is definitely shadow banned and was demonetized a few years ago, and so yeah, it's been really tough for me to get back out there with my videos, so it would be a great support and help to me if you did that. If you feel called to, I would really appreciate that. So I am going to go now. I am wishing you an amazing day, and remember, as always, to keep it juicy. Okay,